Welcome to Pyrography Made Easy. I'm Brenda. In this tutorial episode, I am going to show you how I traced from this Western tanager photograph. I will also explain why and how I altered the photo. Well, let's get started. Photo analysis. When examining a reference photo, there are three things that I think should be checked for. First, identifying the main subject and the focal point of that subject. Second, remove anything that competes or distracts with the subject. And third, simplify the subject matter. This means removing things that aren't necessary. Obviously, the main subject is the bird, and the focal point is his head. The face is the first thing we want the viewer to notice. Now examine the photo and decide what, if anything, competes or distracts from the main subject. The very first thing that I noticed was this bright branch in the background. It partially bisects his head and is very distracting. Another thing that I found distracting was this other background branch. I also did not like this little nodule that is sticking out on the closer branch. The last thing that I found very distracting were these white patches on this background branch. These I won't remove. Instead, I will burn them the same color as the rest of the branch or the darker areas of the branch. Now look at the photo with an eye towards simplifying the image. The first area that sticks out to me is the mass of leaves near the bird. Fewer leaves will allow the background to be seen, and I think that will provide more visual interest. This large branch on the right can be removed, and the leaf directly behind the bird's head. Now that we've simplified the image, let's move on to the next step. Photo altering. Begin by printing out a black and white copy of the reference photo. Print it on standard copier paper or any lightweight paper. Then use a graphite pencil and start making the alterations discussed in the photo analysis chapter. I am using the Ebony pencil by Soho, but any pencil in the B grades will work. I chose pencil because it erases easily. That, and it's cheaper than my colored pencils. Now I do have to tell you that the photo alteration step we are doing is not a requirement. I'm only doing this to help me visualize the changes that I want to make. Also, the coloring does not need to be perfect. After all, this printout will not be displayed on the wall. The yellow arrow is pointing to a section of the branch that overlaps a leaf. I lightly colored over the branch to help it blend into the leaf. I obviously didn't try very hard to match the tonal value. If it helps you with your visualization, take the time to hide the branch better than I did. Something that I want to point out is that I will not be using this printout to trace from. Instead, this is used just to help with the composition of the image. Once I'm done, I'll use it as a reference for the tracing, but I won't trace from it. I am not being very careful as I color around the leaves and branches. I don't need every tooth along the edge of the leaves to help me with my visualization. Instead, I'm just after the basic shapes, just to get a general idea of how things will look. The last thing I did was use a white charcoal pencil to draw in some leaves and branches on the upper left side of the image. I used the white charcoal because it erases easily and will show up in the dark area. If you don't have white charcoal, you can use chalk or colored pencils. Be aware that it might be tough to erase the colored pencil depending on how much is applied and what brand it is. This composite photo shows the before and after I made the alterations. Photo tracing. When I trace over the bird, I use several different types of lines to help convey the textures and features of the bird. Solid lines are used around areas that have crisp or clearly defined edges. On the face, that would be the beak and the eye. Dashed lines are used along the outer edge of the head and along areas where the color or tonal value changes. I alter the length of the lines to match the feathers. For example, the ring of feathers around the eye are very short compared to the rest of the feathers on the head. Also, I draw the lines in the direction the feathers are growing. When I create the artwork, my burn strokes will be comparable in length and direction as the lines indicate. With the wings, solid lines are used around the outer edges of each feather. Dotted lines are used along the edges of any markings on one feather. This combination of solid and dotted lines makes it easy for me to differentiate between the feathers and their corresponding markings. Let's recap the lines I use on the bird. Solid lines are used on areas that have clearly defined edges, like the beak, eye, and individual feathers. Dashed lines are used in areas where the feathers are hair-like, so that would be on the head and the belly. The dashed lines are drawn in the direction the fur grows and have a similar length of the feathers. Another spot I use dashed lines is along the rachis of a feather. The rachis is the line or shaft that runs down the center of a feather. Dotted lines are used around any markings found on a feather. For the tracing, I am using an unaltered printout. As I trace the background branch, I am ignoring the moss and any branch starts. The reason is that the less fine detail there is, the more the branch will get pushed into the background. As I trace this background branch, I avoid the little nub that I disliked. I'm including some of the irregularities on this branch because it is close to the bird. The closer you want something to seem in your artwork, the more detail and tonal variety it should have. I am using dotted lines to indicate where the shadow starts on the branches. With the leaves, I use solid lines along the outer edges of each leaf. Then I use dashes along the vein lines on the leaves. Any shadows I want to include would be marked with dotted lines. As an object gets further away, the harder it is to see the fine details. Because of this, the distant leaves appear to have smooth edges, and the side veins are very hard to see. With these leaves, I only marked the center vein and the shadow lines. Fine-tuning. The last thing I do is add some changes directly to the surface of the board. Well, actually, I prefer to do the final step on paper because it's easier to see and I don't have to worry about trying to remove stubborn pencil marks. Once I'm happy with the line drawing, I ink it in. The dark ink makes it very easy to see the lines. Plus, I can photocopy the line drawing for future use. Here is the photo before and after I digitally altered it. I did this just for the video thumbnail, but I do think that it shows the impact of the changes I made. Well, that's it for this tutorial. I have a written version of the tutorial that is available on my website, Pyrography Made Easy, and that written tutorial has the reference photo, so you can try out the things that I showed you in this video. I will put a link to that blog in the description below. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.